everyone, and welcome to today's chat, which is all about why your mouth is the driver of both health and disease, and why it is so important that we actually look after our oral health. So there is a huge connection between our oral health and the health of the rest of our body, including the gut. And of course, there is a connection between our gut health and our oral health, because there are no one-way streets here. They're always bi-directional. So gum disease not only causes problem in the gut, but it is also linked to chronic diseases such as diabetes type 2, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Alzheimer's, several cancers. And there is some research to suggest that oral health could be linked to even more severe COVID-19 symptoms. Gum disease is also linked to adverse pregnancy outcomes, which is one of the reasons why dental care is free in those in New Zealand if you're pregnant. So it's paramount that we take care of our oral health. Now, one of the biggest issues around oral health is bad breath. So something like 40 to 90% of people will have some form of gum disease or gum inflammation, which can be a sign of what we call oral dysbiosis. So that is when there is an imbalance in the type of bacteria and the amount of certain bacteria in our mouth, and that then leads to bad breath. Now, many of the products that we use to freshen our breath may actually do more harm than good. There is some evidence suggesting that alcohol-based mouthwashes may cause oral cancer. A lot of the research is not conclusive. But what it looks like is if you drink a lot of alcohol, if you smoke, then using an alcohol-based mouthwash increases your risk of oral cancer. Acetaldehyde is a metabolite. It's a breakdown product of alcohol, and it's a well-known cancer-causing chemical, which is what we call carcinogen. And it's thought that alcohol over time can cause something called leaky gums. Now, you've heard of leaky gut, leaky lungs. I've talked about this, and this is where the lining, which is usually fairly tight and only allows some substances to pass through, actually that barrier isn't quite as robust as it should be, which allows certain compounds to pass through into the bloodstream that really shouldn't be there. And in the case of the mouth, it's thought that certain cancer-causing substances actually pass through the gums, or what's called the oral mucosa, and into the bloodstream. Now, when you think when you brush your teeth, sometimes you might bleed. So there's lots and lots of blood vessels in our mouth. So it's really easy if the integrity of our gum or oral mucosa, our gum lining, if that's kind of not as robust and strong, then things can pass through into our bloodstream. And that might be what causes the potential risk for cancer in the long term, particularly for those who are frequent users of alcohol-based mouthwashes. Now, using gums, chewing gums and breath strips as well, they only mask the smell. They don't actually remove the cause of the bad breath. So they'll only remove or mask the smell for a short period of time. And a lot of them contain chemicals that can exacerbate gut symptoms. They might have sugar alcohol in, which can actually cause things like diarrhea and cramping and bloating. And they also contain synthetic sugars, which we know can also disrupt the gut microbiome. So they're not always the best, and they only mask the smell. It's a bit like if you have a teenage boy who doesn't shower and he just sprays Lynx over the top of his body odor. It's not actually getting rid of the body odor. What he needs is a good shower. It's the same thing with when we're taking those chewing gums and those kind of fresh mints to make the taste in our mouth feel nicer and mintier. And the other thing is plaque. So reducing plaque is really important. Now, some plaque is important, but we don't want too much. And microbes live in layers of plaque, and different microbes live in the different layers of plaque. And so as plaque builds up, it becomes more anaerobic. Anaerobic is when there's no oxygen. So the bacteria and the kind of the microbes that live there, they actually don't need oxygen to survive. And that means that we end up with different types of bacteria living in the plaque that really shouldn't be there. And most of those are the disease-causing bacteria. So as I said, many of those anaerobic loving microbes, they don't require oxygen to survive. They produce toxins and byproducts and acid, which damage the teeth and cause decay. They also, because of some of the byproducts that they make, actually create high amounts of inflammation and also inflammatory chemicals that end up being passed into the bloodstream through the oral mucosa, and that then can cause inflammation elsewhere in the body. And that's how chronic disease can start. So most chronic disease has chronic inflammation as one of the root causes and also the drivers. So that's why reducing plaque is really important. And brushing your teeth helps to break down those plaque layers. And there's been studies to show that it's why brushing for 2 minutes is so important. So brushing for 2 minutes will break down about 55% of plaque, which is why it's so important. And brushing your teeth after dinner or after breakfast or after lunch, every time you eat a meal, is even more important for that reason, to stop that plaque from building up. So there is a company called Microbiome Labs. They have 2 products. One is a mouthwash with enzymes in that actually remove the odors, the bad breath, for several hours, because it's not masking, it's actually basically gobbling up the byproducts that cause the bad breath in the first place. And I know they're also in the process of launching a product that actually breaks down plaque in order to reduce that oral dysbiosis, that imbalance of bacteria, viruses and yeasts and stuff in the mouth, and therefore actually reduce long-term inflammation. And the mouth is home to about 700 species of bacteria, but it also is home to lots of other microorganisms too, such as fungi and viruses and protozoa. It's the second largest home to a diverse group of microbes, the gut being the first. So I think it's something like 22% is found in the oral cavity. Now we have a core microbiome, which is our predominant species, and the microbiome also means the genes of those predominant species. And we have a variable microbiome, which is really individual to us and our environment. Now, researchers are starting to show that some of the bacteria, particularly in our mouth, are specifically linked to specific health conditions, such as Alzheimer's, atherosclerosis, which is a kind of hardening of the arteries, pancreatic cancer, SIBO and IBS, oral cancers, colorectal cancers, and even aspirated pneumonia. Now, with colorectal cancer, the research shows that there's a particular bacteria, Fusobacterium, which is found in the mouth, which we normally swallow because it's in our mouth. And usually the stomach acid, hydrochloric acid, would destroy this bacterium. But if you have low stomach acid, which might be due to using something like omeprazole or other antacids, because you have reflux, then you obviously won't have the amount of stomach acid that you would normally have. And that then means that the Fusobacterium doesn't get destroyed by the stomach acid. It travels through the small intestine, intact, to the large intestine. And when it's there, it actually causes inflammation and has been shown to trigger colorectal cancer development. This same bacteria, Fusobacterium, which is a family, has also been shown to pass into the lymph through something called the mesenteric lymph, where they can then stimulate the development of lupus. And there's other bacteria that are also associated with the development of lupus too. In regards to atherosclerosis, which is the hardening of arteries, then there are specific bacteria in the mouth that pass through the gums into the bloodstream. They colonize on the lining of the blood vessels. They stimulate an inflammatory response. They create the plaques, which then leads to atherosclerosis as well. Alzheimer's, there's lots of different possible drivers for Alzheimer's, and one of them starts in the mouth. So LPS, which is called lipopolysaccharide, is a toxin that's found on the outside of specific bacteria. And that has, in the same way we've talked about how it can pass through the gut lining into the bloodstream, well, it can also pass through the gums into the bloodstream, through the leaky gums. That then travels to the brain. Remember, it hasn't got very far to travel to the brain. That can cause inflammation in the brain, and that's also associated with Alzheimer's. Really exciting research is around pancreatic cancer. So we know that pancreatic cancer is a horrendous cancer. People generally don't get diagnosed with it until late stage, which means that most people don't survive pancreatic cancer. But now researchers think that they may be able to predict the risk of pancreatic cancer based on the type of bacteria in the mouth. So they've been looking at high amounts and low amounts and how that relates to pancreatic cancer. There's a specific bacteria called Porphyromonas gingivalis, and those that had that in their mouth had an overall 59% greater risk of developing pancreatic cancer than those who didn't contain that bacteria. They also found that when they did tests on those with pancreatic cancer, they checked their oral microbiome. There was other types of bacteria where they found that, again, they were at least 50% more likely to develop the disease if it's other bacteria. So there's specific bacteria that they've realized that they find in the oral cavities of those with pancreatic cancer, and now they're looking at whether they can use that in the future as a screening tool. Now, what can happen is that inflammation in the gums can cause this dysbiosis, this imbalance of bacteria numbers and types. That stimulates an immune response, which is known as a bystander effect, or causes what's known as a bystander effect, which is when the immune cells try and attack the bacteria in the gums, and as a result, they start attacking our own gum tissues, which then can lead to autoimmune type reactions. And as in gut dysbiosis, it's important to support the microbes that we know are beneficial to health, that are meant to live in the mouth, so they can keep check or outcompete the bacteria that is not beneficial to health, that actually drives disease. So what we eat makes a really big difference, and there's this vicious cycle that comes about because of what we eat. So when we eat, the microbes in our mouth basically eat before we do. Our beneficial microbes actually metabolize, they break down the sugar and carbohydrates. They then produce acid, which supports the growth of the not so beneficial microbes, such as P. gingivalis, which then produce their own byproducts, which are toxic and drive inflammation. So to summarize, our beneficial microbes eat sugar. They make byproducts which support the growth of bad bacteria. The bad bacteria then produce these byproducts which support the growth of bad bacteria, which then support the byproducts which support the growth of bad bacteria. And you end up with this dysbiosis. You end up with plaque development, and you end up with inflammation in the mouth, which then moves out into the body. There's also a link between gut dysbiosis and leaky gut, which then causes oral dysbiosis and leaky gums. So when you have a leaky gut, which again is not a technical term, it's usually called intestinal hyperpermeability, which is basically when the intestine isn't permeable, it allows lots of things through into the bloodstream where it shouldn't. Same thing happens. So you have a leaky gut, certain compounds like that LPS pass through the gut barrier, end up in your bloodstream, circulate around your body, and they can end up, just like they can in any other parts of your body and create inflammation, they can end up in the soft tissue in your mouth, cause inflammation in your mouth, which then causes oral dysbiosis. And then it becomes a vicious cycle, because the oral dysbiosis means that you've got bacteria there which you swallow into your body, or moves out from your gums into the bloodstream and then circulates around your body. So it becomes another vicious cycle. So it's paramount that while we work on fixing the dysbiosis and the inflammation in the mouth, but we have to do the same thing in our gut, fix the gut imbalances and heal the gut lining at the same time, because they both drive each other. So my top tips, number one, you have to fix the gut. So a diet that is a Mediterranean type diet with lots of herbs, Asian spices that are really anti-inflammatory. You want a diet that's fiber rich, that's prebiotic rich as well, plant-based mainly. It's not to say you don't eat meat, but it's those whole food plants, fermented foods, fermented beverages, 30 plus plants a week. The more variety in your diet, the more variety in your gut, and lots of healthy fats. Really, really important. That's what our gut thrives on. Reduce the smoking, reduce alcohol use, and reduce or get rid of those alcohol-based mouthwashes and use others, because even though the research isn't conclusive that everyone that uses an alcohol-based mouthwash is at risk, the jury's still out. So it's better to just use a mouthwash that is not alcohol based. There's loads of options out there. But if you smoke and if you drink lots of alcohol and you use an alcohol based mouthwash, your risk increases. Reduce the sugar in your diet. So reduce the sugar-based beverages and the sugar-rich foods, you know, the biscuits and the cakes and the lollies, the Coca-Colas and the Pepsi-Colas and the lemonades, all of that. We need to reduce that. Brush your teeth after eating. It actually helps to reduce the plaque, which is basically removing the opportunity to end up with the oral dysbiosis. See your dentist regularly. You know, don't ignore any pain or inflammation or any infection. Go and see your dentist regularly. Go and see a hygienist and get your mouth checked, because of the link between the mouth and all our other systems in our body. It's not something to take lightly. Have a look at the microbiome labs and have a look at the products that help to reduce the plaque development and eliminate bad breath. Full disclosure, I get absolutely no commission or anything based on products. I don't usually recommend specific products, but they're the only company that's actually looking at this specifically and have those products to reduce plaque development and actually eliminate bad breath rather than mask bad breath. And the company's run by microbiologists. And then keep your eye out for oral testing. As far as I know, it's not available in New Zealand yet, but it's on its way. Other countries are able to actually test the mouth for all of the different bacteria and other bugs that live there to find out if the balance is healthy or not. So keep an eye out, and maybe in the future we'll be able to actually test to see what our oral microbiome is doing and how that relates to our health, and then we could do something about it too. So if you're interested, go and have a look at my blog. I've got loads of references on the blog that you could go and have a look at and read some more. This is a really important topic, and I think it's fascinating, and I think there's so much more we're going to learn. The gut microbiome is obviously an area that's exploding, but our mouth is part of the same tube, and so much starts here that then actually has a link to what goes on in the rest of our gut and the rest of our body. So I hope you learned something. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you